It was almost midnight when Maria quietly pushed open the side entrance of the Walmart, her hands trembling as the storm outside lashed at the glass doors, and the dull flicker of the streetlights painted her face in nervous shadows. She wasn't supposed to be there that night. Her shift had ended hours ago, and every sensible thought in her mind told her to go home, lock her doors, and forget about the man waiting inside. But temptation is a powerful thing, more powerful than guilt, stronger than fearing. As she stepped past the silent aisles filled with lifeless mannequins and discounted goods, she felt the thrill of doing something forbidden crawl through her veins. At the back of the store, near the stockroom where the cameras didn't reach, stood Kristonite security guard who had been her secret for nearly 2 months. He was older, rugged, with tired blue eyes that looked like they'd seen too much of the world. And yet when he smiled at her, she forgot every warning she'd ever told herself. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his badge gleaming faintly in the dim light. "You came," he said, his voice low, rough, like gravel dragged across concrete. "I shouldn't have," she whispered back, though her body betrayed her words as she moved closer, drawn to him like a moth to a dangerous flame. What they had wasn't love, it was something darker, born out of loneliness and secrecy, a connection made in stolen moments and silenced phone calls. But tonight felt different. There was tension in the air, a heaviness that made her chest tighten. Chris kept glancing at the clock, at the exit, as though waiting for something or someone. She touched his arm, trying to read his face, but he just muttered, "We don't have much time." Before she could ask what he meant, the sound of thunder roared overhead, and for a second the lights flickered, plunging them into darkness. When they came back on, she swore she saw a figure at the far end of the hallway, a shadow that didn't belong to either of them, but by the time she blinked, it was gone. Chris laughed it off, told her she was just nervous, but his hand lingered near his holster longer than usual. They talked in whispers, words tangled in tension, promises that meant nothing outside these walls. When she finally decided to leave, Chris caught her wrist gently and said, there was something in his tone, almost fear, but she brushed it off with a tired smile. The rain had grown heavier by the time she stepped outside, her heels splashing through puddles that mirrored the bright Walmart sign overhead. The parking lot was nearly empty, except for her small silver car under the flickering lamppost. She felt watch ties in the dark, movement just beyond her sight, but she told herself it was just paranoia. She unlocked her car, slid inside, and took a deep breath, her fingers still shaking from the rush. Then her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "You should have stayed home, Maria." Her heart stopped. She looked around the empty lot, her breath fogging the glass, and saw nothing. Another message came in. "He's not who you think he is." Her pulse quickened. She turned the ignition, ready to drive off, when suddenly a hand slammed against her window, making her scream. It was Chris, drenched, shouting something she couldn't hear through the glass. She lowered the window halfway, but before she could speak, a dark figure appeared behind him, faceless, fast, and holding something metallic. A flash of lightning illuminated the scene, followed by a deafening crack that didn't sound like thunder. Maria screamed as Chris fell to the ground, blood mixing with rainwater. She tried to open the door, but before she could move, the window shattered, glass spraying across her face, and the same faceless figure reached in. Her last thought before everything went black was that maybe she should have listened to that first voice in her head, the one that told her not to come back tonight. Detective Marcus Hale stood under the harsh glow of the parking lot lights, rainwater dripping from the brim of his hat as he surveyed the scene that had already begun to rot in the public's imagination. The Walmart parking lot was now wrapped in yellow tape, the air thick with the metallic scent of blood and gasoline. Maria's car sat there, door half open, the driver's window shattered, and the seat soaked with a mix of rain and red. Hale crouched beside the vehicle, eyes sharp, unblinking. He'd seen 1,000 crime scenes before, but this one felt different. The security cameras had caught almost nothing. A flicker of movement, a blur of a shadow, and then static, as if someone had known exactly which cables to cut. The only body found was that of the security guard. Christopher Reed's single gunshot wound to the chest, wallet missing, badge torn off, and yet no sign of struggle. Maria was gone, no blood trail leading away, no footprints distinct enough to follow, just the faint smell of her perfume in the rain. Hale lit a cigarette, ignoring the paramedic's disapproving glance, and muttered, "This isn't random." His partner, Detective Ramos, younger and less hardened, frowned. "You think it's personal?" Hale exhaled smoke into the storm. "Everything about this screams personal." They began questioning employees inside the Walmart, tired cashiers with dark circles under their eyes, janitors who swore they hadn't seen her after her shift, and the night manager, a jittery man named Paul who seemed too eager to shift blame. Maria was quiet, he said, twisting a rag between his fingers. Kept to herself mostly, but she'd been acting strange lately, always checking her phone, leaving early, coming back late. Hale's eyes narrowed. "And Reed?" Paul hesitated. "He was a good guard, but he had a temper. Got into a fight last month with a customer over a return. We almost fired him." Ramos scribbled notes while Hale's gaze drifted toward the back hallway on the security monitor, the same place the footage glitched before the murder. Something gnawed at him, a pattern forming in the static. He turned back to Paul. "Who else knew Maria would be here last night?" Paul swallowed. "No one, I think, unless..." He stopped. Hale stepped closer. "Unless what?" Paul hesitated, then whispered, "Unless you count the guy who kept waiting for her outside after her shift. Drove an old blue Chevy. I thought it was her brother or something, but she always looked scared when she saw him." Hale exchanged a look with Ramos. "Did you get a plate number?" "No, but he had a Walmart employee badge hanging from the mirror." Hale's cigarette burned to the filter. "Find out who owns that truck," he ordered, already walking back toward the rain. He crouched again near Maria's car, his reflection warping in the puddle of red and gray. Something glittered just beneath the driver's seat. He reached in with tweezers and pulled out a small flash drive, wrapped in a torn piece of paper that simply read, "You're next." His pulse slowed, his instincts sharpening like a blade. Whoever did this wasn't just a killer, they were sending a message. Ramos looked at him nervously. "You think this ties to the guard?" Hale pocketed the drive. "No," he said quietly, his eyes lifting to the storm above. "I think the guard died trying to stop it." The rain came harder, washing the blood into the drains, but Hale knew this was far from over. Somewhere out there, Maria was either running from her killer or working with them, and whichever truth waited to surface, He was ready to drag it out from the dark, no matter who it buried. By the next morning, the rain had stopped, but the air inside the precinct was heavy with unanswered questions and the stench of stale coffee. Detective Hale sat at his cluttered desk, the small flash drive from the crime scene plugged into his laptop. The screen flickered, loading a folder named Shift Logs Confidential. But when he clicked it open, there was nothing, just a blank window and a single corrupted video file labeled CAMO4. He hit play, and the screen dissolved into static for a moment before revealing the dim Walmart storage room. The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m., the same night of the murder. The footage was grainy, distorted, but Hale could make out two figures, Maria and the security guard, Chris. They were talking, close enough to suggest familiarity, maybe even intimacy. Maria appeared nervous, glancing over her shoulder again and again, while Chris gestured toward something off-screen, a shadow, moving fast, too blurry to identify. Then the video froze for a split second, and when it resumed, Chris was on the floor, Maria screaming silently as if the sound had been erased. The lights flickered, and then the footage cut off entirely. Hale replayed it 3 times, each viewing making his gut twist tighter. Someone had tampered with the file, he could feel it. "You see something?" Ramos asked, leaning over his shoulder with a bagel in one hand. Hale didn't answer, just pointed at the frozen frame of the shadow. "That's not random distortion. Someone edited this." Ramos frowned. "You mean someone inside the store?" Hale nodded slowly. "Or someone with access to their internal servers. Either way, they didn't want us to see who was in that room." Just then, Captain Monroe walked in, her tone clipped and cold. "Hale, I just got off the phone with Walmart's regional security. They said Chris Reed was under internal investigation for theft before he died. Cash discrepancies from the registers during his shifts." Hale raised an eyebrow. "And Maria, clean record. Except..." Monroe paused, flipping through the folder in her hand. "She filed a harassment complaint 2 weeks ago against a senior manager named Paul Jensen. The same guy who told you she was acting strange." Hale's eyes darkened. "That coward didn't mention that." Monroe sighed. "He's been with the company for 10 years. They're protecting him." Hale stood, grabbed his coat, and said, "Then we'll see how long they can keep him safe." Within an hour, he and Ramos were back at the Walmart, watching the morning shift open the doors like nothing had happened. They found Paul in his office, pretending to type, eyes darting nervously when he saw the detectives. Hale closed the door behind them and tossed a photo of the flash drive on the desk. "Recognize this?" Paul blinked. "No, should I?" "It was under Maria's car seat," Hale said, voice low. "Funny thing, your name's in one of the corrupted files." Paul's face went pale. "That's impossible. I had nothing to do with this." Ramos leaned forward. "Then why didn't you mention she filed a complaint against you?" Paul stammered. "It was a misunderstanding. She thought she'd been talking to someone online. A guy named Hunter. Said he knew secrets about the store, about Chris." Hale exchanged a sharp look with Ramos. "Hunter. Did she ever mention his real name?" "No, but she kept getting these messages, private ones during her shift. I tried to warn her, but she wouldn't listen." Hale's jaw tightened. "Warn her, or silence her." Paul stood, shaking. "I didn't kill her, I swear." Hale stepped closer until their faces were inches apart. "Then tell me where she is." Paul's voice cracked. "I don't know. But she said if anything happened to her, the truth was hidden in the night logs. Storage room 4. Check there." Hale turned to leave, his mind racing. As they exited, Ramos muttered, "You think he's telling the truth?" Hale didn't answer. His instincts told him this case was no longer about a single murder. It was about a cover-up big enough to bury anyone who got too close. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above as Detective Hale and Ramos descended into the underbelly of the Walmart, a place most employees didn't even know existed. The maintenance supervisor, an old man with trembling hands, had reluctantly given them access after Hale flashed his badge and muttered something about obstruction of justice. The air down there was cold, damp, and smelled faintly of bleach and mold. The deeper they went, the more it felt like stepping into the veins of a secret the store itself didn't want to share. Storage room 4, according to the map, was at the farthest corner in isolated chamber, marked authorized personnel only. When they reached it, Hale noticed the keypad lock was new, recently installed, and not registered in any employee log. He exchanged a look with Ramos. "Corporate security doesn't change locks for no reason," he muttered. Ramos tried the handle. Hale knelt, pulling a small tool from his coat pocket, and with practiced ease picked the lock open. The door creaked like an old confession as it swung inward, revealing a small, dimly lit room lined with metal shelves. At first glance, it looked like a standard supply space, but something felt off. On the far wall was a panel of disconnected security monitors, each labeled with camera numbers that didn't match the store's system. "This isn't part of the main feed," Ramos whispered. Hale nodded. "This is a separate surveillance network." He wiped a layer of dust from one screen and froze. The screen flickered to life, showing footage from the night of Maria's disappearance. Only this time the angle was different. It showed the same scene, Maria and Chris in the storage room, but now the shadow in the corner was clear. It was Paul Jensen. He was holding something metallic, looked like a gun butt. The feed abruptly switched to another camera, a parking lot view, where a third figure, dressed in a security uniform identical to Chris's, was dragging a body-sized bag toward a black van. "There were 2 guards," Ramos said, voice low with disbelief. Hale leaned closer. "Or 1 imposter." He began scrolling through the footage, tracing every frame until he found a freeze where the imposter's face was partially visible but distinctive enough to show a scar along his jaw. Hale printed the frame, pocketed it, and said grimly, "We're dealing with an inside job." They turned to leave, but as they stepped out, the faint sound of footsteps echoed from down the corridor. Someone was there. Hale signaled Ramos to kill the lights, and they crouched behind a stack of boxes. The footsteps drew nearer, measured, deliberate. A figure appeared in the doorway, flashlight in hand, sweeping the beam across the room. The light caught on the open monitor feed, and the man froze. "Damn it," he hissed, voice low but unmistakably was Paul Jensen. He stepped inside, muttering under his breath, "You shouldn't have come down here, Maria." Hale's blood turned cold. He signaled Ramos to stay still. Paul walked toward the monitors, unaware of the 2 detectives hiding in the shadows, and reached for one of the hard drives. That's when Hale stepped out, gun drawn. Step away from the system, Paul. Paul spun, eyes wide with shock, but instead of surrendering, he lunged for the lights. The room plunged into darkness. A scuffle broke out, metal clattered, boots scraped concrete, and a single gunshot echoed. When the lights flickered back, Ramos was breathing hard, and Paul lay face down on the floor, a small pistol still clutched in his hand. Hale kicked it away and checked his pulse alive, but barely. He wasn't trying to destroy evidence, Ramos said. He was trying to hide something. Hale knelt by the monitors, scanning the still glowing screens. On one of them was a time stamp from the following night, 12:03 a.m. and, in the footage, Maria appeared again, standing in the same hallway, alive, looking directly at the camera, whispering something the microphone didn't catch before the screen cut to black. Hale's heart pounded. "She's alive," he murmured, realization dawning like lightning. But if Maria was alive, then the question wasn't who killed her, was why everyone wanted the world to think she was dead. The precinct was dead quiet when Detective Hale returned just before dawn. The flickering fluorescent lights overhead buzzing like restless flies. He hadn't slept in 30 hours. His clothes were soaked with sweat and dust, and his mind was spiraling with questions that refused to settle. Maria was alive, or at least she had been, 12 hours after her supposed murder. The footage from storage room 4 didn't lie. He replayed the video for the 10th time, studying every frame, freezing on the moment she looked straight at the hidden camera. Her eyes weren't the eyes of a victim. They were sharp, deliberate, almost defiant, as if she knew someone would find this recording one day. She mouthed something. Hale zoomed in, adjusted the playback speed, and slowly made out the words, "He's not dead." His breath caught. "Chris," he whispered. The security guard who'd been found with a bullet in his chest. The same one whose autopsy report claimed a clear gunshot wound to the heart. Could he still be alive? Ramos arrived carrying 2 coffees, setting one beside Hale. "You look like hell," he said. Hale didn't even blink. "Look at this." Ramos leaned closer, watching the grainy image. When Maria's lips formed the words, his jaw dropped. "That's impossible." "We saw his body." Hale leaned back in his chair. What if the body wasn't his? The room fell silent, except for the rain returning against the windows. Ramos frowned. "You're saying someone staged the scene?" Hale nodded. 2 guards, remember. One real, one imposter. Maybe the imposter's the one who died and the real Chris disappeared with Maria. Ramos rubbed his temples. "That's one hell of a theory." "You think they're working together?" Hale took a slow sip of coffee, eyes never leaving the screen. "Or maybe she's running from him." Just then, his phone buzzed. Dan, unknown number, no caller ID. He hesitated, then answered. "Detective Hale." A woman's voice came through, soft but trembling. "You shouldn't be looking for me." Hale froze. "Maria." There was silence, then the faint sound of wind and traffic in the background. "They're watching you," she said. "Everything you saw in that room, it wasn't supposed to exist. If you keep digging, you'll end up like him." Hale's pulse quickened. "Where are you? I can help you." But before she could respond, a sharp noise like glass breaking cut through the call, followed by static. Then the line went dead. Ramos stared. "Was that her?" Hale nodded, already pulling up the precinct's call trace system. "Get a location." The computer processed for several seconds before spitting out coordinates: an abandoned rest stop 30 miles outside the city, near an old trucking route. "Let's go," Hale said, grabbing his coat. Within an hour, they were parked near the desolate station, the rising sun bleeding red over the horizon. The place looked like a ghost town: broken vending machines, shattered windows, and graffiti that told stories no one wanted to read. Hale moved slowly, hand on his gun, scanning for signs of movement. "Maria," he called. No answer, just the hollow moan of wind through the cracked sign overhead. Then Ramos spotted it, a trail of fresh tire marks leading behind the restrooms, ending at a rusted van. Hale approached, his gut tightening. The rear doors were half open. Inside, a small space had been converted into a makeshift living area: blankets, canned food, a phone charger plugged into a car battery, and on the floor lay a folder labeled "Employee Access Codes, Confidential." Hale picked it up and opened it. Inside were pages of internal Walmart blueprints, payroll lists, and names circled in red, including his own. "What the hell?" he muttered. Before he could finish, his phone buzzed again. A message flashed on the screen: "Leave before it's too late." Ramos looked around, gun drawn. "We're not alone." Hale's instincts screamed danger. Somewhere behind them, gravel crunched under slow footsteps. They turned toward the sound, guns raised, but the lot was empty. Then Hale saw it, a reflection in the van's mirror, someone standing behind the old sign, watching. A man, a faint glint of metal in his hand. Hale shouted, "Police, drop it." But the figure slipped away into the trees before they could fire. Ramos cursed under his breath. Who the hell was that? Hale stared at the tree line, his expression hard. Whoever he is, he knows we're getting closer now. He knows we won't stop. The day had turned gray and heavy, clouds hanging low over the highway as Detective Hale and Ramos drove back toward the city. The rusted van's image still burned into their minds, like a warning they couldn't shake. The folder of confidential documents sat open on the dashboard, pages fluttering from the wind, sneaking through a cracked window. Every sheet told the same story: corruption, running deeper than either detective had expected. Employee names tied to off-the-books payments, falsified security footage logs, and a mysterious recurring signature marked only as H. Carter. Hale had seen that name before, but couldn't remember where. It was the kind of ghost that hid in the fine print, haunting every line of bureaucracy. "You think Maria found all this?" Ramos asked, breaking the silence. Hale nodded, his grip tight on the steering wheel. "She found something she wasn't supposed to, and that's why she ran. But whoever Carter is, he's still out there, and if those names in red mean anything, he's tied to half the people we've already questioned." They arrived back at the precinct just past noon. Captain Monroe was waiting for them in her office, her expression unreadable. "You two have stirred up a storm," she said flatly, tapping a stack of reports on her desk. "Corporates. They're calling Maria a runaway and Chris's death an accident." Hale laughed bitterly. "An accident? A gunshot wound to the chest? That's a hell of an accident." Monroe lowered her voice. "You're treading on powerful toes, Marcus. You think Walmart's clean? Half the town's payroll runs through their donations." Hale slammed the folder down. "Then let me get dirty." She held his gaze for a moment, then sighed. Do what you have to do. But if this backfires, I never authorized it. That was all he needed. Within an hour, he and Ramos were back on the road, tracking the partial VIN number from the van through a federal database. The hit came fast, registered to a Harold Carter, a former corporate investigator for Walmart's internal security division, terminated 3 years ago after a whistleblower case went silent. Hale's mind churned. Carter isn't a ghost, he's the cleanup guy. Ramos frowned. Cleanup. The one they send when someone gets too close. Following the address linked to the registration, they found themselves on the outskirts of town at a small scrapyard surrounded by metal fences and barking dogs. The office was empty, the smell of motor oil and rust thick in the air. Hale scanned the lot until his eyes caught something under a tarpa familiar blue van. He approached cautiously, lifting the tarp's edge. The engine was still warm. He's here, Hale whispered. Suddenly, a metallic click echoed from behind them. Drop the gun, detective. The voice was rough, older, but calm. Hale turned slowly to see a man in his 60s, broad-shouldered, wearing a mechanic's uniform with grease-stained hands and a pistol aimed squarely at his chest. Harold Carter, I presume, Hale said evenly. The man nodded. You've been poking around things that don't concern you. Ramos moved subtly to the side, trying to angle his weapon, but Carter noticed. Don't, he warned. You think you're heroes. You're just pawns. She's not who you think she is. Hale's jaw clenched. Maria, Carter smirked. That's not her name. She's been using aliases for years. She worked for ES. She wasn't a victim. She was the one collecting evidence on internal theft rings. Chris Reed was her handler. Hale's eyes widened, the puzzle snapping painfully into place. Then why the fake murder? Because she went rogue, Carter said coldly. She found out the corruption went higher than we admitted. She was going to expose everyone, including me. His grip tightened on the gun. But she underestimated how far this company will go to protect itself. Hale's tone hardened. And what about the threats? The fake footage? The bodies? Carter's eyes flickered. Sometimes the only way to kill a story is to bury its writer. Before Hale could react, the sound of tires screeching echoed across the yard. A black SUV burst through the gates, masked men inside firing shots. Carter dove for cover. Hale and Ramos returning fire as bullets tore through the air, shattering windows and ricocheting off scrap metal. Sparks flew, engines burned, and in the chaos, Carter disappeared into the smoke. When the gunfire stopped, the SUV was gone and so was Carter. Ramos caught his breath. What the hell just happened? Hale stared at the van, now riddled with holes. Someone didn't want us talking to him. He turned toward the highway, determination blazing in his eyes. Maria's our only lead left-hand now. We find her before they do. By the time the sun went down, Detective Hale's instincts had shifted from suspicion to full-blown paranoia. Every passing car felt like a tale, every ringing phone a warning. He sat in the dark of his apartment, blinds half drawn, the glow of his laptop illuminating the chaos pinned across his wall photos of Maria, Chris, Paul, and Harold Carter, connected by threads of red string that converged on a single word written in bold marker: control. He replayed the phone call from Maria over and over, trying to pick apart the background noises, the rumble of trucks, the metallic clank of chains, and the faint cry of seagulls. Somewhere coastal, maybe near the shipping district. "You shouldn't be looking for me," she'd said, but he knew better. People who didn't want to be found didn't leave breadcrumbs. His gut told him she was setting something up, a meeting, or maybe a trap, and he was willing to walk straight into it if it meant answers. The knock on his door came quietly, 3 slow taps, like a rhythm only someone who knew him would use. Hale reached for his gun before opening the door a crack. It was Ramos, looking pale, sweating through his shirt. "We got a hit," he said. Traffic cam near Pier 17 picked up a face match on Maria Live an hour ago. Hale grabbed his coat. "Let's move." The docks were deserted when they arrived. The smell of salt water thick in the air and fog creeping across the ground like something alive. Containers loomed like silent tombstones, their metal sides slick with condensation. "Split up," Hale ordered, scanning the rows with his flashlight. Somewhere in the distance, a chain clanged, followed by the soft echo of footsteps. "Maria," he called, his voice swallowed by the mist. Then he saw her standing near a stack of crates, hair damp, eyes wide but calm, a faint bruise darkening her cheek. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. Hal approached slowly, gun lowered. "You called me? You said Chris isn't dead." Her lips trembled. "He's not. But you won't find him the way you're looking." Hale frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Before she could answer, a red laser dot danced across her chest. Hale lunged forward, dragging her behind a container, just as a silenced shot cracked through the fog. "Sniper!" Ramos shouted from somewhere behind them. Bullets sliced through the air, hitting steel with hollow clangs. Hale peeked around the corner, spotting movement atop a crane. 2 men in tactical gear, one with a rifle, the other with a radio. "Back up now." Hale barked into his radio, but the line hissed with static. "They're jamming us," Ramos yelled. Maria clutched Hale's arm, eyes wild. "They're not after you, they're after me." Another shot rang out, grazing Hale's shoulder. He gritted his teeth and fired back, hitting one of the attackers square in the chest. The other ducked behind the crane ladder. "We have to move," he shouted. Maria nodded, and they sprinted toward the warehouse at the end of the pier. Inside, the place was dark, except for a single flickering bulb and rows of empty pallets. "We can hide here," Ramos said, panting, but Hale shook his head. "No, we're boxed in." Maria suddenly froze, staring at something in the shadows. "Oh God," she whispered. Hale turned and saw what she meant: a chair in the center of the room, a body tied to it, head slumped forward. He approached cautiously and lifted the man's chin. It was Chris Reed, alive but barely. His eyes fluttered open for a second, blood crusted on his temple. "Marcus," he rasped, "it's all staged. They used me to draw you in." Hale's stomach dropped. "Who?" Chris's lips moved weakly. "Carter." "Wasn't the top." Then his body went limp, head falling forward. The echo of boots outside snapped Hale back to reality. Maria backed away, shaking. "We have to go now." Ramos ran to the side door, but it was chained from the outside. "We're trapped." Hale spun toward Maria. "You knew this would happen." Her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't think they'd find us this fast." The sound of a door creaking filled the air, followed by slow, deliberate footsteps. A familiar voice called out, calm and cold, "Detective Hale. You just don't know when to stop." Hale's blood turned to ice. He knew that voice it was Captain Monroe. The echo of Monroe's boots grew louder, deliberate, confident, until her shadow appeared under the warehouse door, long and sharp against the dusty concrete floor, as if she owned the darkness itself. Hale's gun was already raised, his wounded shoulder throbbing, his breath shallow but steady. "Put the gun down, Marcus," she said coolly as she stepped into the light, her badge glinting under the flickering bulb. Her uniform was crisp, but her expression was something he'd never seen before, calm, mixed with cruelty. "You wouldn't understand what's really happening here." Ramos took a step forward. You were covering this up." Monroe's lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Covering up? No, controlling it. Everything you think you've uncovered, the files, the payments, the false footages, all part of a containment system. We don't erase crimes, Detective Hale, we manage them." Hale's jaw clenched. "You're running a black operation through a corporation," she shrugged. "Call it what you want. The company funds the department provides protection, and I make sure nobody digs too deep. Maria was one of us until she started questioning who was really giving the orders." Maria's eyes burned with fury. "You killed Chris. You had Carter clean up your mess." Monroe tilted her head. "Carter was loyal, but sloppy. You should have seen his face when he realized he was next." Hale's grip tightened on his weapon. "Why bring us here?" Monroe's smile widened, cold and sharp. "Because you were getting too close, and now I can end this without questions." The doors behind her opened, and two men in black suits entered, their rifles raised and eyes hidden behind tinted glasses. Hale fired first, dropping one instantly, the sound echoing like thunder in the empty space. The second returned fire, bullets ricocheting off metal beams, sparks flying as chaos exploded in the room. Ramos dove for cover behind a crate, shouting, "We're outnumbered." Hale grabbed Maria's hand and pulled her toward a side stairwell leading up to a catwalk. The metal stairs rattled beneath their feet as they climbed, the sound of gunfire and shouts blending into a storm below. "She's not going to stop," Maria yelled, clutching her side as they ran. "She doesn't need to," Hale growled. "We just need proof." At the top, they reached a small office overlooking the floor. Hale kicked the door open and found a wall of monitors showing live feeds from the warehouse, the pier, even Hale's own apartment. "She's been watching us," he muttered. On one of the screens, a file transfer was in progress. Project Resolve, active operation clearance. Maria's eyes widened. "That's the archive. Every transaction, every murder, every cover-up." Hale connected his phone, copying the files as Monroe's voice echoed from below. "You think you can expose me? Go ahead, Detective. See how long you live afterward." Then the monitors went black. The lights in the warehouse flickered off one by one until only the emergency lamps glowed red, casting everything in a hellish hue. "She cut the power," Ramos called out. Hale pocketed his phone and grabbed Maria's arm. "Move." They ran along the catwalk toward the exit ladder. But Monroe appeared at the far end, gun raised, her face ghostly in the red light. "You're not leaving with that data." Hale stepped forward, unflinching. "You can kill me, Monroe, but you can't bury the truth forever." She laughed softly. "You think truth matters to people like them? They built their lives on lies." She fired once, the bullet grazing his thigh, but he didn't stop. He lunged, slamming into her, both crashing against the railing. The gun clattered to the floor below. They struggled, her hand reaching for his wound, pressing hard. "You should have stayed out of this," she hissed. "You should have remembered who owns you." Hale shoved her back with everything he had, sending her teetering over the edge. For a second, she hung there, fingers clawing at the rail, eyes filled not with fear but hatred. "You'll burn with the rest of them," she spat, and then she let go. The sound of her body hitting the floor echoed like a closing chapter. Hale leaned on the railing, breathing hard, blood seeping through his shirt. Ramos rushed up, helping him stay upright. "We got what we came for," Hale said weakly, holding up his phone. Maria stared down at Monroe's body, expression unreadable. "No," she whispered. "This is just the beginning." Rain hammered down on the city like a cleansing fire as Detective Hale's car screeched to a stop outside an abandoned motel on the edge of town. The wipers barely kept up with the storm, but his mind was sharper than ever, despite the pain radiating from his wounds. In the back seat, Maria hunched over a battered laptop, the stolen drive plugged in, and the faint glow of code reflecting off her face. Ramos stood by the door, gun drawn, eyes scanning the parking lot. "We're sitting ducks here," he muttered. Hale nodded grimly. "We don't have a choice. Once this upload is live, the world sees everything." The plan was simple: get the files to a journalist Maria once trusted, someone outside the city, someone untouchable. But simple plans rarely survived the night. "How long?" Hale asked. 6 minutes, Maria replied, fingers flying across the keys. "But if they trace us before it finishes, they won't," Hale interrupted, though his tone betrayed uncertainty. He glanced at the cracked screen, where folder names scrolled by. Bribori reports. Each one a confession written in data. Each one a death sentence for someone powerful. Ramos shifted nervously. "You think Monroe was bluffing about how high this goes?" Hale exhaled. "No, she was cleaning up for someone bigger. Someone who doesn't show their face." Lightning flashed, illuminating the road end, the black SUV pulling up across the street. "We've got company," Ramos barked. Hale reached for his weapon, his heart pounding. "Time." 3 minutes, Maria said, panic rising in her voice. The SUV doors opened, and armed men poured out, moving fast and silent through the rain. Hale fired first, the muzzle flash lighting up the night as bullets ripped through puddles and glass. Ramos returned fire, hitting one, then another, but they kept coming, well-trained, methodical, relentless. Maria ducked lower, shielding the laptop. "If this dies, everything dies with it," she shouted. A bullet shattered the motel's front sign, sending sparks showering down. Hale kicked over a table, turning it into cover. "Ramos, window." Ramos nodded, reloading quickly. On it, he fired toward the SUV, blowing out the windshield before ducking back. Hale's shoulder screamed with pain, but he ignored it, moving to block the door as another wave of attackers approached. 1 minute, Maria yelled. Hale's breath came ragged now. He knew they wouldn't make it out clean, but if the truth went live, it wouldn't matter. "Keep it uploading," he said, voice hard. "Even if we go down, they can't silence us all." Then came the deep, familiar voice from outside, amplified through a megaphone. "Detective Hale, step out. It's over." Hale froze. The voice belonged to Deputy Chief Warrenda, man who had assigned Monroe to the case in the first place. Maria's eyes widened. He's one of them. Hale's jaw tightened. He's the one. The door creaked as Warren stepped into view, flanked by soldiers in black raincoats. His expression was calm, almost sympathetic. You've done good work, Marcus, real good. But this ends tonight. Hale aimed his gun at him. You killed Monroe too, didn't you? Warren chuckled. Monroe was a liability. You're becoming one too. 30 seconds, Maria shouted. Warren's eyes flicked to her. Ms. Vega, I should have known you'd crawl out from under the dirt again. He raised his pistol. Hale fired before he could, hitting him in the arm. Chaos erupted. Bullets tore through the walls. Rain mixed with smoke, and Maria screamed as the laptop was hit, sparks flying. Hal DeVoe for it, shielding it with his body. It's done, she cried. It's online. Then a final shot rang out, and Ramos fell back against the wall, blood spreading across his chest. Go, he coughed. Hale grabbed Maria's hand and pulled her toward the back exit as the motel burned around them. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, faint but growing. We made it, Maria gasped. Hale looked back at the flames. If the world's watching now, maybe. She stared at him. What if they shut it down? Hale met her eyes, rain running down his face. Then we find another way to make them listen. Behind them, the motel collapsed in a roar of fire and thunder. But on every phone, every news screen across the city, the files of Operation Resolve began to spread uncensored, unstoppable. The system that had silenced so many had just been exposed by the very people it tried to bury. The rain had stopped by morning, but the city didn't wake up the same way it used to. News drones hovered over the smoking remains of the motel, while every major network ran the same headline: Operation Resolve Leak exposes corporate police conspiracy. Names scrolled endlessly on the ticker: politicians, executives, officers, all tied to crimes hidden for years. Detective Marcus Hale stood on the rooftop of an old parking garage, the gray light of dawn washing over his battered face. His coat was soaked, his arm wrapped in a bloodied bandage, but his eyes burned with something he hadn't felt in a long time: vindication mixed with loss. Below him, the streets buzzed with chaos, protesters, reporters, and armored trucks trying to control a city that had suddenly realized how deep the rot went. He lit a cigarette with trembling hands, watching the smoke drift into the pale morning. Maria stood a few feet away, her hair tangled, her clothes torn, holding a flash drive in her fist like it was the last piece of her soul. It's all out there now, she said softly. Every name, every payment, every lie. Hale nodded, exhaling slowly. They'll try to spin it, say it's fake, call us traitors, but it won't matter. Truth spreads faster than fear now. She smiled faintly, but there was no joy in it. And what about you, detective? You think they'll let you walk away after this? Hale shrugged, his gaze still fixed on the rising sun. They already tried killing me 3 times. I figure they'll need to get in line. Maria stepped closer, her voice trembling. We lost too much, Marcus. Ramos, Chris, even Monroe was a monster, but she was made by the same machine we just broke. Hale turned toward, her eyes dark. Machines rebuild. Monsters evolve. The only question is who'll be next to clean up the mess. The sound of approaching sirens echoed through the city, growing louder, closer. They're coming for us, Maria said. gripping the flash drive tighter. Hale crushed his cigarette beneath his boot and reached into his coat, pulling out a small envelope. "This isn't over," he said, handing it to her. "Inside's a name. A journalist I trust. If I don't make it out, you give him that. Tell him the files were just the beginning." She took the envelope, confusion flickering in her eyes. "What do you mean, if you don't make it out? We're in this together." Hale looked at her with the kind of wariness only men who've buried too many friends know. "You're the face they'll believe. Me, I'm the cop who broke the code. They'll make an example out of me before lunch." She shook her head. "No, Marcus, we can disappear, start over." He gave a dry laugh. "People like me don't disappear. We just fade into case files." The first police cruisers turned the corner, their lights painting the buildings red and blue. Maria stepped back, torn between running and staying. "You could come with me," she whispered. Hale smiled faintly. "You already saved the story. Now save yourself." He turned and started walking toward the street, gun still holstered but ready, his silhouette swallowed by the flashing lights. "Detective Hale," an officer shouted through a megaphone. "Hands where we can see them." Hale stopped, hands raised halfway, rainwater dripping from his sleeves. "You boys really think you're on the right side?" he called back. No answer, just the metallic click of rifles being aimed. Maria watched from the rooftop as Hale stood there, surrounded by a dozen armed officers, his breath steady, his eyes unflinching. Then, slowly, he reached into his coat knot for his gun, but for his bajand, dropped it into a puddle. The sound was soft, almost lost under the sirens. "You can't arrest what's already broken," he murmured. In the next second, chaos erupted, orders shouted, shots fired, glass shattered. Maria screamed his name, but the storm drowned it out. When the smoke cleared, Hale was gone, his body never found, only his badge and a spent casing left behind. Weeks later, Maria sat in a small cafe by the coast, watching the news play the footage of the leaks again. The world had changed. CEOs arrested, officers suspended, the department dissolved. But in the shadows of the broadcast room, she caught a glimpse of a man in a worn coat walking past a camera, same gait, same scar on his cheek. Her heart stopped. A ghost in daylight. She smiled through tears, whispering, "You made it." Outside, the sea crashed against the shore, as if erasing the blood of the past, and somewhere far away, Marcus Hale disappeared into the world he had helped expose, one secret at a time.